talk about pivoting, our next chat or discussion, an introduction, I'm sorry, presentation will be by Wilma Lam. And she's going to talk about breaking through the senior designer ceiling. That is actually one of the most prevalent challenges in someone's career that we've noticed, as people move from being a practitioner, how do they evolve to that next level? And it's really honored to bring Wilma Lam to the table. Wilma here is a strategy director at Substantial, a digital innovator, a digital innovation and design studio in Seattle, where she leads design strategy and research initiatives with clients across a broad range of industries. Her design approach incorporates understanding complex systems and the impact of business and societal incentives. As a researcher and strategist, she emphasizes the importance of working across scales, thinking at the individual, societal, and global levels in developing new products and services. She has an interdisciplinary background, bringing together business strategy, experience design, and product development, and brings project experience from consumer products, connected devices, health tech, and digital services. Prior to Substantial, Wilma led business innovation and design strategy initiatives for Johnson & Johnson's Design Group and MetLife's Innovation Center. Wilma holds an MBA from the Yale School of Management with a focus on design and innovation and a Bachelor of Architecture from Cornell University. Wilma, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Let me see if I can share my screen. Okay, great. Is my screen showing?
Sure is.
All right. Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday. Very excited to be sharing on this topic. I think just as a little bit of background, so Substantial is a hybrid first agency based out of Seattle, and we're made up of researchers, strategists, designers, and developers. And in practice, we specialize in human-centered design, equity-centered research, and business innovation. So our team is 50 people. So in the course of working with 50 people now, and especially a growing design team, and also in previous roles as a manager and leader at Johnson & Johnson, I've had the opportunity just to mentor and lead a variety of designers that were kind of, worked up to this kind of senior designer or senior strategist or senior researcher level. And we're really looking to take on that next level of responsibility. So sort of the way that I've written this talk is not only, what are the topics and things that I'm talking about with individuals like at this point in their career when I'm mentoring or coaching, but also kind of reflecting back to when I was sort of a senior strategist or senior researcher, what was the advice that I wish I had gotten or the information that I wish I would have known at that point in time. And one of the big things that I start with when I'm talking to individuals at this kind of inflection point in their career is starting to think about kind of like two tracks. When you're talking about leadership in the design field, in multiple organizations that I've worked at, there's usually a specialist track where you dive deeper into kind of a niche within design. So usually these are more like associate principal or principal level roles where you dive really deep into a specific subject area and you're coaching and leading your team from that level of expertise. And then the other track is more of a management track. So this tends to go up into like having a manager title or a director title. And that becomes really much more focused about how do you lead a design team, involves design operations. And so when I'm talking to senior designers around these two options or like two potential tracks, it's not so much that I'm expecting that they need to choose one track or another, but it's really that discovery process of how can you start to try, one track or another and kind of figure out where you want to go with your career. But with either track, one of the big topics I think is important to start thinking about is how do you break away from the kind of project focused orbit? I think it's very easy when you're an individual contributor to really focus on like, oh, I've been assigned this project or these two projects. And everything that I'm focused around is, what is it going to take to be successful in this project? What are the outcomes I want for this project? But as you're think about kind of the next level of leadership, a big part is being able to see beyond the immediacy of of the project and exactly what needs to happen there, and really start thinking at a kind of meta level, first at the portfolio level, starting to understand multiple work streams and multiple projects that are really happening at the same point in time that either you or team members are working on, and also being able to look at the breadth of the portfolio to think about, okay, these are the projects we're working on today. What about the projects that we're going to work on tomorrow? And what is kind of vision of the portfolio in the future as well? And then going even higher level, starting to think about, the team itself and the organization itself. In particular, this is really starting to understand like skills and capabilities that are needed, and starting to have a clear vision around, where is the team today? Where should the team be headed tomorrow? And how that also intertwines with kind of like, well, what kind of portfolio projects should you have? And how is that related actually to the individual project, which you maybe at the senior designer level right now are working on, and being able to kind of see all of that together as kind of like a meta mindset shift that starts to happen as you're looking into higher level leadership roles. And so there's kind of like two core mindsets that I usually talk about when I'm working with someone. The first is the shift from single project success to repeated portfolio success. And I think what's important here is thinking not so much of it being a mindset shift from like thinking about one way into another, but the ability to actually think of multiple scales at the same time. So within still having goals and a vision for what you need to do on an individual project for it to be successful, at the same time being able to hold in your mind, okay, well, we also want to be able to replicate success on other projects in the portfolio, either that I might work on in the future, or maybe colleagues of mine are working on now. How can we learn from each other across projects? And how can I demonstrate leadership and thinking in this way? The second really significant kind of mindset scale shift is, I want to continue to be successful in my role. And there's a certain set of like design skills that I need to continue to build and specialize and grow in for that individual success. But at the same time, thinking about, okay, what are the skills and leadership qualities and things that need to happen at the team level, not only for your immediate team, which is usually like the design team, but also teams that work with your team. So in my case, it's often working with a sales team or an engagement manager team, or if you're within a larger corporation, it might be, partnering with your engineering team or your project management team. And really thinking about, okay, across all these teams that I work with, like what are the things that are required for success, and how is my role right now feeding into that larger team success? And as I think towards the future, what are ways I can grow in terms of being able to contribute more to that team success, and increasingly thinking more not only about, what it takes for you to be successful, but for the broader team to be successful. So starting to think about, how do you start demonstrating these mindset shifts? So like when I've worked with senior designers, a lot of times there's this question of like, oh, like it feels so big to start thinking about portfolio level or team level, or I don't feel ready, or I need to go and, I think from the conversation earlier, I need to go and get an MBA to be able to lead, and I need to formally learn. But the reality is actually a lot of the skill sets that we use as designers now can sort of be redeployed in a new way to apply to kind of portfolio level thinking and team level thinking. And kind of like the first of these would be like human-centered design, kind of like how you approach thinking about the team, empathizing with the team. I think there's systems thinking, which is directly applicable to how you think about portfolios of projects and a role of, yourself within a team or a team within a larger organization. And last is kind of how you apply design strategy, looking at it not so much, traditionally at kind of a project level lens, but starting to really extend that design strategy into, what does it mean to strategize for a team, and to have a vision for where a team should head, or where a series of projects should head at this kind of larger level. So, I mean, with human-centered design, traditionally, this is often used as, you need to have deep empathy for the people you're designing for and put them at the center of problem solving, in work at, like with research especially, it's like, well, you're interviewing individuals to understand where's the problem space and what is the solution. And I think one thing that's interesting to think about is how often does this actually happen, like within a team? or with partners of your team. It's starting to extend the same empathy and understanding to teammates, to colleagues, to identify, okay, what are actually the team needs? What's happening with the portfolio? What are barriers that we are encountering? Like actually starting to regularly ask those questions of like, oh, this is what's happening on a project, or this is what's happening in our portfolio. Like, where do you feel like talking to colleagues or talking to your leadership, there are opportunities to grow, or where are you seeing barriers in the way that we work? And out of that, our understanding, starting to think about, how can we build solutions that actually internally? Are there ways to streamline our work, to grow capability in our org? Are there things that I can do as an individual to contribute to that? It's kind of like the first thing that I often talk to mentees about. And then the second piece gets into systems thinking. So, I mean, in work and in application, we talk about this a lot in terms of projects. Like if you have a digital project, oh, there's like a design system that you're working with and all those pieces are interrelated. Or if you're doing service design, it's like there's all the different parts of the service and how are those related. And I think also reapplying that internally to thinking about, how does one project within a portfolio fit? How is actually a portfolio projects interconnected? Or within a team, what are like the different roles of members of the team and how do you work together? And starting to think about kind of the relationships in this way. And so with that, also understanding, where are the systems now, where can they be improved? A lot of times it's super helpful to leadership to be able to articulate, oh, these are our current processes. Here's how those processes can be better, to start to demonstrate in ways that maybe are not assigned to you in a senior designer role, but starting to demonstrate, I can have this level of thinking to be able to lead and to be able to think differently about how our team is operating. And then the last would be going from design strategy to organization design. I think in particular, often on an individual project, they're thinking about, okay, what are the goals for this project? What is the strategy behind how we're going to do it? And ultimately, like, why does this project exist? What's our purpose? And then kind of stacked into that thinking, okay, well, these are like the tools we're going to use, like this particular design tool. Here's the methods we're going to use. I think being able to apply that at the same, in the kind of same method of thinking actually to the team itself. So if you're a designer on a team, looking for clarity on these things, asking questions about these things, having a clear understanding for your team, what is the purpose or the strategy. And certainly if you're starting to interview for these kind of leadership level roles, being able to actually ask about these things when you're like talking to an organization, or to be able to, envision forward, like these are the things I would do to be able to arrive, at having a purpose and a strategy and setting goals. And there's definitely ways, like when you're working on an individual project as an individual contributor, to be able to do this. So it's starting to kind of seek to understand the strategy of like every project that you work on, being able to articulate the goals, not only for yourself as a designer, but being able to storytell that for leadership, both within the design team, but also outside. So if you're an agency, it would be clients and partners. If you're in-house, it would be leads on other teams that you'd be partnering with. So if we're going into kind of examples of how this is done, like when I'm working with senior designers, a lot of times, like these are the specific questions that I ask them. So if you're starting a project, do you have a clear understanding of the vision of the project and why your team is working on it? And if you don't have it, is that something that you can help to be a part of crafting or being able to demonstrate leadership in that way? Can you think about, for this individual project, how can you grow your capabilities? Like what are your own personal goals kind of coming out of this project? And then at the end of the day, when the project is over, like what can you demonstrate to have learned or to have led from within the project? And were there opportunities where you could then extend that into portfolio level leadership? So maybe making something that can be shared with other members to apply on their projects, or at the team level to be able to do some sort of like skill share within the team. And then at the portfolio level, often it's asking that question of like, do you understand how this project's supposed to fit in the larger kind of portfolio projects? Are there specific processes, tools, or frameworks that you can create to help the team work more effectively? So examples of this that we've seen senior designers step up and do on our own team is start to develop design libraries or deliverables glossaries or examples of frameworks that could then be deployed by the rest of the team. And then third would be team and org level application. So, great questions to ask here. It's, how can I identify needs for the team or stakeholders by applying human-centered design methodology? What are those key barriers and assets? How is our team organized? Starting to think more about, design organization, design operations. How do we partner with others? What is the role of our design team within kind of the larger organization? And are there things I can do to be more a part of that process? And then third, how does my current project or the team's current portfolio help us get to our larger team goals? And so this leads in that question of like, do you have a clear understanding of the vision of this team and how you can be a part of it? And if that vision is not clear, can you be a part of helping to bring clarity to the team for what that vision could be? So tools along the way, like mostly so far I've talked about kind of mindset and how to change that mindset, how to kind of identify opportunity. There's a set of like concrete tools that, I usually speak about when I'm coaching someone through this process. And I think some of them have actually been spoken to really well in the panel earlier. So someone mentioned, have your own kind of board of directors. I think the first of these is really like cultivating strong mentorship relationships. And I'd say in particular, for this topic, it's looking for individuals that are good at project, portfolio, and team level thinking, and bringing them on as mentors, not only so you can ask them what they do, but also observing like how they actually use those skills and apply them to day to day. And for them to be able to help you, it's really about sharing, your own goals, asking for feedback regularly on your own approach to say like, these are ways of thinking I'm trying to demonstrate. Here's ways I've tried to do that. Are you able to see that? Is this effective? And being able to talk to them on a regular basis to get that feedback in order to grow. The second one, I think a panelist also talked about this earlier, it's getting to know the business. So, as you move up in kind of leadership within design, it starts to become less about just, success on the project from a design perspective, but also success on the project from a business perspective. And that also involves design operations around the project. So seeking a higher understanding of the context around how, you're resourced on projects or your team is resourced, understanding the financials behind, your team or your department or your agency, and, what do project managers or sales or account engagement, HR and operations, like what roles do they play in contributing to kind of like financial management and resources. And I think a really good example of this that I usually recommend that senior designers start doing is, can you shadow how project proposals are put together? Can you listen in resource meetings where they're talking about financials and resources to kind of start to get a handle of these things so that as you move up, you're set to be in a position to be able to speak to these things well and start to make some of those manager level decisions. I think the third is, I think this is really important. I think especially for this year, working with senior designers that are trying to make this change in a pandemic where there is potentially like a feeling of having less support than you would be in person. And just with everything happening in the world, it's trying to shift from this focus on problems of kind of showing up to meetings and conversations and leadership saying like, these are all the things that are wrong that we need to solve. It's starting to show up and thinking about, okay, ideally, what do I want to have happen on this project? Or what do I want to have happen for me or for the team? And then working backwards from that to be able to be optimistic about what the future should look like and be like, okay, here's actually the things that I think we should do, or I want you to problem solve with me, but towards a kind of ideal future versus like, these are just the problems we need to solve. I think it starts to indicate, like that you can lead and you can inspire others and you can bring optimism into a conversation, especially when times are difficult. And the fourth one is around like seeking opportunities. So not only like changing the mindset, which I talked about earlier, but starting to actively build new habits. And this is the part where also having good mentors to model that behavior is especially helpful. But like things that I've suggested or seen here that are often helpful to kind of drive, portfolio to project to team level thinking is starting to think about, when you lead kickoffs or when you're lead retrospectives before and after a project. Can you talk concretely about like what are the goals at that project level, at the portfolio level, at the team level? And how do you check in as projects continue or as portfolios expand or shrink to understand, you know, are those goals changing? Like, are you understanding those goals? Are you able to kind of work towards them? And then also identifying like within a team, what are smaller scale leadership opportunities, like managing interns or leading, you know, small projects or managing smaller portfolios of work that you can start to do in a way to kind of, you know, test out what it's like to practice some of these skills and have mentorship in the process of doing that. So kind of in summary, with the things that I've shared today, I think there's kind of like four key things that I would kind of leave everyone with. One is, you know, really seek to empathize with your team. Like moving into a leadership role becomes so much about being team-based. Second, really try to build on, you know, the portfolio and team visions, extending that thinking forward to this kind of like to be able to hold like multiple mindsets at the same time. Third would be to think towards the future and then be open about what's possible. So hopefully this conversation was helpful. I really appreciate the conversation and talk about this topic, Angela. It's one I care a lot about. And also Substantial is hiring. So if you're interested, come join us.
Wilma, what a great talk. And thank you so much for sharing your best practices and your methods and moving through, you know, that senior designer ceiling, right? This is, wow. Anybody who's interested should definitely reach out to Wilma. Can you share later your contact information on the side? So if anybody's interested in joining Substantial, as well as learning more from you. I love your point about, we're running a little bit late, so I just want to just quickly comment. So we don't have that much time for Q&A, but you talked about mindset, and you know, it's interesting, the duality of understanding what you need yourself career-wise, but then also realizing that if you're going to break through that senior designer ceiling, it's also understanding what the organization needs, and that balance between the two, I think is so, that balance is so critical, right? To hold on to. What would you advise for people if they're moving through this? How much time does it take for someone to move through this shift, learning how to look at what the organization's needs are, you know, ask for that responsibility, you know, this is something that's going to take a little bit of time, right, for some.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is also how clear initially you are on like what you want and what leadership means to you. Like I've known people where, you know, within a few months, it was very clear to them, like my future goal is to be a director at this kind of practice. What do I need to do to get there? There are other people where I've known where, you know, when you're talking about choosing between a specialist track and a kind of managerial track, it might take them a year or two of really testing out the waters to be like, actually, this is where I want to head with my career. And I think through that, what I advise is like, well, there isn't wasted, you know, time in trying things and getting to learn things. And it might take you longer to figure it out, but you'll have learned a lot of key skills along the way and kind of focus on that piece.
Yeah, it takes time to build your ability to speak up and participate and have someone, the organization, see your value in that way of contributing. Yeah, I love it. And then well, I see that Sarah has shared your slides and your link to your website for any opportunities. Excellent. Thank you so much, Wilma. I love what you've shared. This is so helpful. I don't think I've ever seen anybody get that granular and breaking down the different ways to see this. And can I just quickly ask, are you the planner? I feel like you're the planner.
I'm definitely.
You are so good. And people like you help help design, actually produce and sustain such great, you know, initiatives. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Angela.
You're welcome.